name is Delaere. I am currently doing my PhD at the Urban Mobility team, working on the European Horizon 2020 project INDIMO. I am doing this together with Dr. Samujit Basu and Professor Imre Keshru. INDIMO stands for Inclusive Digital Mobility Solutions and wants to create solutions for digital inaccessibility of its inhabitants. In the EU, currently 42% of the inhabitants do not have the skills to access the digital network, and INDIMO wants to solve this issue. The project has 5 main goals. The first one, to create a better understanding of the needs of users for a digital mobility system, to create a better understanding of their knowledge about the requirements for such a system, to co-create tools that help develop engineers, operators and policymakers create more accessible and usable tools and applications, to do this using the Universal Design Manual so that everything is developed according to universal, inclusive and accessible guidelines, and to influence future policy on European and regional levels. The INDIMO project will create the Inclusive Digital Mobility Toolbox, which contains of 4 tools, being a Universal Design Manual for Digital Transport System, Universal Interface Language Icons for that system, to have guidelines for cybersecurity and privacy assessment, and to create a policy evaluation tool for policymakers. The main focus groups are the vulnerable to exclusion people, being lower income citizens, rural residents, elderly people, or migrants, for example. The tools I mentioned will be tested in 5 pilot situations, 1 in Madrid, 1 in Antwerp, 1 in Emilia-Romagna, 1 in Berlin, and 1 in Galilee in Israel. The VUB is currently project leader, but is also involved in many of the research topics. The first one being to understand the development and deployment of digital mobility systems by studying the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the policymakers, developers, operators, and user group representatives. We have conducted semi-structured interviews with 25 of these stakeholders and have invited 36 experts for a co-creation workshop. These have resulted in 4 initial inputs. First is that co-creation among these experts is very important. Secondly, that the bottom-up approach, which is flexible with input from potential users, will create a better tailored app. Thirdly, that collaboration between operators, developers and policymakers is very important for a good suited app, and that policymakers need to create a clear regulatory framework so it makes it more easy for operators to operate in a certain area. The input from this research will be used to develop the policy evaluation tool, which is some sort of online checklist for policymakers to evaluate a certain operator or service. If the service complies with certain rules they want to use, then they can introduce them to the city or otherwise look for other operators. A tool like this will be tested in the 5 pilots, and in the pilots the VUB also plays a critical role in the assessment of certain aspects. First of all, we will do a process evaluation and usability assessment, which evaluates how decisions were made and how usable the tools are. Secondly, we'll do an applicability and transferability assessment, which will evaluate whether these tools can also be used in cities and regions outside of the pilots. And last but not least, we will also do an impact analysis to see how much and whether the tools have any impact. If you are interested or want to know more about the project, you can always visit us on indimoproject.eu or be part of the co-creation community. Thank you for listening.